Okay, morning all. Yeah, there's a couple of people still joining. So firstly, thanks to those of you that have made the time to join the session. So if you didn't join the previous session, this is part 2 of that session. So in the previous session, we went through Acumatica 2026 R1 and some of the features. I'm going to recap on one or two of them, but this is basically a session that is involving other features within 2026 R1. So if you didn't see that first session, or if you missed it, on our website there is recordings of these sessions, and I encourage you to go and you review that session. So in a lot of the session around 2026 R1 in the first session, we discussed a lot around the portal, the new UI in Acumatica and how you can change your screen. So I will recap a few of those items. But I think what we have noticed, as we've been going through this journey with our clients is whether you're a new client or an existing client, Acumatica has changed some of their licensing structure, and they've also changed the way they handle their software in terms of retired versions. So I'm going to go through a bit of that just to let everybody understand what's involved in the new license structure, and then also what are the benefits and why have they done this. So in the previous session, I went through the development strategy. I'm just going to go through that now. So how does Acumatica, when they look at the product, how do they develop the product? So they make it future-proof. So what they do there, future-proofing is making sure that they stay current with the technology, with the requirements of an ERP system, and not just an ERP system that's morphed over many years. You've got AI now and so on and so forth. So they want to make sure, and as part of their strategy, that they're always future-proofing their software. And then in terms of that, future-proofing you as a client or a customer. So then they looked at adaptability. So how quickly can they change with the change in market, with the change in strategy, of ERPs or the world? The world's changing continuously. So how do they adapt and quickly transition to that, but not add risk to the client? Also industry specific. They've got their tiers and their verticals. So as an example, they've got construction, or you could have the retail edition, you could have the professional services edition. So it's very focused, and the whole point of that is to try and not be a jack of all trades or to provide everything to everybody. So they will focus on a specific pillar, and they'll make sure that they're future-proofing, that they provide in features that are relevant to that industry. Okay, and user experience, probably one of the most important, well, from what I've seen, is it's how you navigate the system, your experience with the system. Is it easy to use? Do I need a developer to make changes? And that's definitely where they've shifted with the new UI. So a lot of the changes, and I'll show a bit of their roadmap a bit later, you'll see a lot of it, they're going to start using AI to make that user experience far more less onerous on the individual, so that the computer can then start to change your screen, and that based on, or the AI can start to change your experience based on your role as an example. So a lot of exciting features coming down the line, and then obviously AI first. Okay, so again, that's their development strategy, and that's call it their 5 pillars. When they review development, this is what they continually have in the back of their mind when they develop in Acumatica. So as I mentioned in the previous session, over 1,000 features between 2000, that should be 25, sorry, 2025 and 26. Sorry, that's versions, 2005 and 2006. So what that ultimately means is they've taken in the past year, and you can see there's a few I've highlighted here. They've taken a look at the various modules, and they've released 1,000 new features within Acumatica, and it's a lot. We can see it. Sometimes we'll come across a feature, and we realize it just because we've worked on the version. So huge amount of effort has been placed into this version, and that includes going into, you'll see in version 2026 R2, same level of effort is going into that. Okay. So I always refer to under the hood. So you'll see, I mean, I'll talk about, the NASCAR. And the reason why is that I relate that back to the software. So, there's the outside, the UI, the user experience, and then there's the under the hood, the so-called engine that is driving this. So the modules, the features, and all of that needs to fit together. It all needs to combine in order for you to get over that race line. And how they've gone about it is through their roadmaps, through their development strategy. Sessions like what I'm having with you, there's a community, they do it as well as Acumatica. So they're constantly making awareness around their features and their functionality. They also have a huge community around where customers, partners, even people outside of Acumatica can load requests for features, which we also recommend to clients. So, if there's anything that you think Acumatica maybe can enhance or that there's maybe something missing, I would recommend also going on those features, because what they do is they take all of those features into account when they do the development, and you may see one of your features inside. So under the hood really is in this context to this is really going through what's available in 2026 R1. What have they added? What's changed? So we're going to unpack a few of those features. Before I do that, though, I'd like to take you through Acumatica's roadmap, how they release their versions, and then also the license structure. As I mentioned, if you're a client that bought Acumatica quite a while ago, the license structure has changed, and there's a process you need to move to get onto that new license structure. And the reason why is a lot around AI. It's around how the licenses are being added and so on and so forth. So they've had to change the technology, and therefore they've had to change the license structure to enable how they can load new modules, the AI, etc., etc. Okay, so if we take a look at their license structure, this is the new license structure. I'm not going to bore you with details, but just to explain is they've essentially got what you could call 4 tiers of Acumatica. So your enterprise, that would be your highest level of Acumatica, your big business, and then you would get your essentials, select, and prime. So basically, essentials is the lowest version of Acumatica, or the lowest tier that you can take. It is limited, and generally that's a user-based license. So it's not licensed by what tiers in terms of your volumes, what we call CTVs, commercial transactions. It would be user-based, so 1 to 5 users, and you can't really see it in the graphic, but they're basically giving you what you would, in terms of how many users using the system, would be in these different verticals. Then within each of these areas or these verticals additions, you get different additions. So I could be retail edition, I could have construction edition, I could have manufacturing edition. So again, you would fit into one of these tiers based on the size of the company, size of volumes, and then you would select the type of edition. So, and some customers have a mix, but ultimately you would fit into one of those editions. And what we're going to try and do, because it makes no sense, potentially showing features for construction when your business is 100% retail. And that's what we're trying to tailor these sessions going forward around. And we'll also be releasing some exciting news around what we're going to be doing within the customer base and externally to have focus sessions around these specific additions. Okay, so as I mentioned, 4 tiers. If you're on, as an example, a legacy license or an older client, you maybe had small business, and you would have probably been in this essentials. So when we move you over, you would move from small business to essentials. And that is quite a process. So we have started to go through that process with our clients to ensure that they're ready for, when if they want to move to AI, and there's certain features that are only available on the new license structure in 2026 R1. Okay, so just go back here. Okay, so just to discuss the releases and how that all fits together. So if you don't know, Acumatica releases 2 versions of Acumatica, and what I deem as a version, it's not patches. So it's not like Microsoft's got its hot fixes or its patches. this is where there's a version change. And a version change, we always recommend to clients, is you should have a sandbox environment or a test environment where you are upgrading to, you are doing thorough UAT testing, making sure you're testing your customizations, making sure your users are testing processes, and not just your day-to-day, but also your month-end processes, because it's a complete version change. Now, some versions have a lot of structural changes. Some versions, it may not have structural changes, they might have UI changes. So depending on what Acumatica is developing, you may require more stringent testing in one area or the other, and we will always advise customers on that. So what Acumatica did about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago is you always were able to stick on a retired version. So you could, as a customer, remain on that retired version. And the only penalty to you would be if you had to log a support request, as an example with us. We logged it with Acumatica, and it's found to be that there is a issue with the software. What they would do is they would charge you to potentially fix that in the version that you're on. What they've changed now is that they no longer allow that. So if your next renewal comes up and you are on what they deem as a retired version, then they will start to penalize you based on that version in terms of your renewal. Okay, so what we're doing with a lot of our clients is we are making sure that we're trying to stay ahead of the curve and make sure that we're upgrading you prior to that. And it's not just up to us, it's also up to the clients, because you will have to test that. So it's good if you haven't started already, it's good for us to strategize with you to make sure that we are planning these, not only from our point of view, but also from your point of view, from a resource capacity, and to make sure that it's, you plan these so that you don't have to do testing, as an example, every year. You can stretch this out to every 2 years or maybe every 2.5 years. So this is just an idea of when the versions will change. So let's say you are on 2025 R1 now. The expected retirement, and again, this is expected, it's not been confirmed yet, is the 30th of November 2026. So as an example, if you were on 2025 R1 and we move into December 2026, and during that month you sign your new renewal, you will start to be penalized until you upgrade your Acumatica version. Okay, and there's valid reasons why they've done this. If you think about AI, they can't keep the AI and certain features in these older versions. There's legacy issues in these versions, or legacy technology, and they are trying to keep their customers, not, I wouldn't say on the latest version, because obviously, there's a lot of testing that some versions go through initially, just when they're released. So at least one behind is what we recommend. And then at least you're staying with these current features that we're going through now. Then they've got a roadmap. So they'll look at, like I mentioned previously, is they'll look at, what is the community saying? What is our customers saying? What is our partners saying? What should we be focusing on? And then they'll roadmap that. Some of it is, it's blue sky thinking at the moment, potentially, but it is focused. So they'll start to detail exactly like what that is. But if you have a look at what's coming in 2027, and this was definitely going to happen. So AI-driven forecasting. So if you think about it, AI has the ability to do forecasting where, yes, you've got models and these type of things, and there's some manual intervention from your sales team and that, but what better way to allow an AI-driven forecast, providing the data is there, is for that to manage that and take away, the human error element, so to speak, not necessarily the human, because somebody's still got to look at it, but to allow that AI-driven demand to do the formulations and the calculations for you. Then intelligent document processing, advanced personalization. So this is something I was mentioning earlier. Can you imagine, you have, for those of you that have ever tried to set up roles or screen access, it is quite complex in Acumatica, not just Acumatica, many ERP systems have the same, because it goes down to field level, screen level, field level. So generally you would place these people in roles, and what they're looking at here is effectively saying, okay, what is your role within the business? And then letting the AI automatically manage the role access, manage what they can and they can't see. Now that'll take time, but I don't think it's far off based on what it understands the software can do, what is that feature, and what is the role that you're describing. Then automated exception handling. So very similar to what I'm going to show a bit later is they've built the AI anomaly detection. So for those of you that don't know anomaly detection, I've got a purchase in as an example, and I've got an anomaly within my could be my costing, and what that'll do is it'll flag it. Okay, so it'll say to you, there's an anomaly detected on this purchase order because of the value. Somebody needs to investigate. Okay, now previously we could do this, but we would have to sort of put in measures. So we'd say, well, maybe if it's over 50,000, flag it. Whereas what the AI does differently is it goes through and it looks at the supplier history. It looks at so what you've been purchasing along. It doesn't necessarily have to have a cap, to say, well, look at anything over this. It'll go and do that on its own and calculate based on the data and historical data that it's viewing. So what they're mentioning here is well, that's great because now I get alerted, but what can I do with that alert? And that's similar to the LLM Studio, where you can actually now program Acumatica to update certain data fields. So in this case, what it's saying is to take corrective action, such as emailing the vendor. So it's picked up there's an issue here, and you could email a vendor. I wouldn't email the vendor, I'd email finance and say there's a potential issue here. But again, it's showing how they are looking at that, using those AI, what I call AI agents, and embedding more and more of that eventually into product. Okay, so some exciting things coming through there. Okay, what I wanted to do is just recap on Acumatica's AI. This is obviously everybody's talking about AI at the moment. There's multiple different vendors, providing. So you've got Copilot, you've got all of these items, and I think, as I mentioned in my previous session, it's always good to take a step back, understand what your business, what is the business requirement for AI, because AI shouldn't be everywhere. It needs to be targeted and focused, and also it depends on the data that you're surfacing. So what Acumatica did is they looked at it and they said, well, everybody needs AI, we know that. But how do we make sure that the data is secure? How do we make sure it's relevant to Acumatica in terms of my ERP? So they came up with three areas, so to speak, within your AI modules. So the AI assistant, and I'm just going to show that quickly. So the AI assistant at the moment, just to explain this as well, this cannot be purchased yet from Acumatica. What they are allowing is for you to sign on what we call beta testing almost. In this case, it will be released. So this is not necessarily beta testing. It's just making sure that it's ready for market and that, if clients are giving feedback, they add in that before they release it. So what they've allowed clients to do is if you're on 2026 R1, you can sign a document that basically states that you want to be part of the beta testing process, and then you will get Acumatica's AI assistant for free up until 2026 R2. When 2026 R2 is released, then it'll become a standard module and there'll be a cost associated with it. I have been trying to get a cost. At this stage, we don't know what the cost is going to be. I have a feeling it'll be tiered. So in other words, depending on how much you ask it, how many GRs you are, you're linking it to, that may determine the tier that it's going to sit in. So at this stage, we don't know, but you do have the ability to go onto this, providing you're on 2026 R1. So I really like the feature. I've tested this. I've mentioned this a few times. I think the things that I like about it. So here I'm just saying show open invoices for a specific customer. And what it would do, and previously in some of these agents that you have, on websites and so on and so forth, it doesn't understand terminology. So, I might refer to a vendor as opposed to a supplier. And it would battle with that. So you had to be very specific. It also kind of went in a loop. So based on your question, it needed a very direct answer from you, or sorry, based on the question it asked you, it needs a very direct answer. And you almost went into a loop on some of these agents. I haven't seen that with Acumatica, and what actually happens is it'll go into the data that you've asked for, and then it starts to give you other information. So now it's advising you. It's not just giving you what you've asked for. It's going to a deeper level, saying, well, you've asked for the top 10 invoices. Why did you ask for that? Or do you specifically want to see within that invoice, or maybe that customer, or change what are you asking for? So for me, I think when I originally viewed this, and I've mentioned this to a few clients, is, I thought what was great is you had the ability to then go and create a standard chart that you could refresh. And after a while of using this, I've realized that that's actually not, well, it can be the purpose, but in our view, it's more about exception-based reporting. So there's no longer a need to have these static reports lying everywhere over Acumatica. What you'd rather do is just ask the AI assistant, and because your requirements may change day to day, month to month, year to year, so you may want to ask different or get different reports and insights. And obviously you don't want to go through reams of data. So ideally what you want to have here is show me my top 5 debtors, or show me where customers are paying, they increase in the date at which they're paying. So it's taking longer and longer for them to pay. Is there a problem here? Do I need to speak to them? Show me vendors where costs are jumping up. It's maybe incremental, or it's, and you wouldn't necessarily know that. You'd have to get a report. So you'd have to go and ask your buying department or your finance department. So depending on what level you are, this can be an operational tool for reporting, and it can also be an operational tool to show me my exceptions. Where do I need to focus? Okay, so that's the office, the Acumatica AI assistant. Then AI LLM. So what LLM is, that's that piece where I can now program Acumatica to do certain things based on prompts. Okay, so I gave the demo where we've created a new stock code, and it could be from a supplier that you've purchased in. So not necessarily something that you manufacture or make. Let's say you're buying TVs, and that was the example I gave previously. Maybe you're selling a Sony TV. You can program this to create the descriptions for the Sony TV. But not only that, through low code, no code, and really it's just adding questions to, or telling the prompter what it must add to the description. So as an example I gave, well, go out and find out why somebody would buy this over that. So in other words, competitor information. So tell me why this is better than Hisense, as an example. And it builds that for you, and so on and so forth. We've had a few clients where we discussed CRM, the lead management, case management. And the whole point of that there is, well, if I'm sifting through a lead and I haven't got to that client or that potential client, notify somebody. And how it does that is it runs through the correspondence, and it can see, okay, well, the customer asked about X, Y, and Z. Somebody got back to them. They said they'd get back to them in 2 months, and that hasn't happened, or in a week. Okay, notify the manager, and not just notify them via an email, log a task against the case or the lead to say, you need to go and speak to this client. They haven't had feedback. Okay, so some very exciting things. I think this is definitely going to be one that will improve over time. And I think, this is going to be similar to the AI agent. The difference here is that it does require an external LLM provider. So we recommend OpenAI. So you connect that to the OpenAI agent. And then what that will do is it'll use that, because obviously it needs a whole lot of information to do some of these things, and it'll go and then generate certain information based on that LLM provider. So just to recap on this one, you would have to license the actual LLM, which is formerly known as AI Studio, and then you would have to purchase something like OpenAI. But we've done many tests on this, and it is cheap. There's a cost to it, but if you use it smart, and the cost comparison is very low when you're using something like an OpenAI. Okay, so that is available. As mentioned, you just need the external LLM. Then AI anomaly detection. Already spoke about this. This is that one where I can track purchase orders, I can track sales orders, I can track invoices, and you do get a certain amount free based on that license. So remember, I said Prime, Select, Enterprise. Depending on how where you fit in that, you would then get, let's say, it's 5,000 calls to go and check those anomalies. And what I mean by calls is you can have a generic inquiry. Let's say it was my purchase orders, and what that'll do is it can check daily, it can check hourly, it can check monthly, and each one of those calls is what then adds up to this amount that you get for free. I would recommend being on, I think they released this in 2025 or 2, if memory serves me, but I would recommend going on to 2026 or 1 to get the full benefit of this feature. Okay, so just go back to LLM. I just want to show that. So that's what I was busy with. So as an example, like I mentioned before, let's say we had a case, that for those of you that are in the service industry and you've got the case system or you've got the lead system, it works in a similar manner. So let's say I had this shipping charges on invoice, blah, 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 and I click on our summary. This now is using LLM, and what it's doing is it's going to OpenAI to generate some of this information. Okay, so this is as though I've licensed the LLM from Acumatica, and I've got OpenAPI, which I've linked it to. Okay, and what you'll see here is the sentiment. So, this customer is satisfied, and the reason why is it's gone through everything, and then it's given me next steps. Now, these next steps, what you can do through the prompter, through the instruction LLM prompter, you could say, well, if the customer is satisfied, leave it. If the customer is not satisfied, escalate. And by escalate, update a field on the case that says escalate. Okay, and it's low code, no code, so you can drag in fields that you want something to occur to. I'm not going to go in detail of this, but that's just a visual representation of it. Very good feature. It is going to, like I say, get wheels over time, and I think you're going to see more and more of this coming in to be that sort of AI agent, that you've seen a lot on these AI systems. Okay, so if we just recap, you get the AI assistant, which we've gone through, free up until 2026 R2, providing you on 2026 R1 already. Then the LLM is that so-called agent where I can review data, I can tell Acumatica to do certain things, and then my anomaly detection is for risk exposure. Could even be the where you want to see the opposite. So all of a sudden a customer is buying something erratically, but on the upside. So yeah, very nice features that they've got in. And then I previously in the last session, I also did one where the AI is going to start to recommend your upsell and your cross-sell. In other words, so if I've got an item that I generally sell with this, it then goes and it says, and that's where the AI is powerful. It's saying, well, generally a person who buys this, we've noticed they're always buying this. And the hit rate is like 90% of the time, that's what we see. And it'll tell you that, and it'll recommend that you actually use that as an item that when I bring up this order, I can say, oh, but most customers we've noticed they take this, and then you can obviously, purchase that on. So very good features coming through, especially around the AI, and that's why I would start to recommend that you sorry, I see. Just want to mute. So I've noted. So what you'll start to see, and that's why we're going through this with our clients, is if you're on a legacy license, start to move over. If you can get to 2026 R1 before they release 2026 R2, I'd highly recommend you contact us. and you get that. We will send you Acumatica will send you a document just for signing, and then we can enable the feature for you. Okay, so if we go back, I'm just going to go to now. So we've gone through our Acumatica roadmap and license structure, our Acumatica AI modules. Although this is not a feature in Acumatica that's come out in 2026 R1, I've dealt with a few clients lately, and they weren't quite aware, especially with security these days, is what is available in Acumatica in terms of signing in. So I'm just going to log out of here. And some of you may already have this. If not, I would recommend having a chat. So generally, you would have your email and your username, whether that's your email address or your name, surname, and then you have your password. What this single sign-on allows you to do is to log into Acumatica using your Azure credentials. In other words, your Microsoft credentials. And the benefit of that is if you've got RT policies that are changing that there's requirements to change your password every 30 days, that then filters into this. And then at least you don't have to worry about username and passwords in Acumatica. It's governed by your Azure. And then I could click here. It's now going to look at my Windows credentials, and it's going to log me into Acumatica automatically. So it's secure. I don't need to worry about people leaving and going in that offboarding process, because there is a way to offboard through then Azure, and it'll deactivate the account. Okay, so that's just the single sign-on. Again, not part of this, this release. It's available in this release, but they released this some time ago. But they're obviously making improvements to that continually. So I would recommend having a look at that if you're not using it already. Okay, so if we just then go back to, that was the single sign-on, improved side panels. So side panels has been around, but what they've done in this version is they've put side panels on steroids, so to speak. So I'm going to just run through an example of what I deem as a side panel. So if I go to my customers and I want to view my customers, generally, you would have to click on this customer. Okay, so if I wanted to see detail around this customer, I'd have to click on them and then go into it. That's called a drill down. The side panel gives you the ability to view additional information around that client, not just to view, but because it's loading a screen against that client, that specific customer, you can sometimes do changes or print an invoice from there, or et cetera, et cetera. So as an example, let's say I was interested to see, what's the latest aging for this specific customer. I can go here, I can click on my AR aging, and it's going to then drill down into that customer, but in the same panel. Okay, so I'm not having to jump around Acumatica to go and see what is my aging for this customer. And the same for statements. So if I wanted to have a look at the latest statement, if I wanted to go and view, so here you can see that was the statement balance at that point, the documents, so this could be my invoices as an example. In this case, it would be, and it'll show me, what documents are outstanding, what's overdue, and then from here, I can drill down further as well. So this is a side panel. The nice thing about side panels, what Acumatica has allowed you to do is add side panels. So now not only have they got standard side panels for you, you could go and create your own side panels. With a bit of training, we would get involved, train you on how to add a side panel, and you could start to do that as well. So again, through low code, no code, you can add a side panel that gives you relevant information, so you don't have to drill down or move out of the screen that you were in. Okay, you'll see a lot of these if you don't know about it, or if you've got, I think, 2025 R2, you can then go and start to experiment with these as well. But from 2026 R1, you'll start to notice side panels being in quite a lot of the areas. So if I had a look at, let's just take a look at sales orders as an example. There's my side panel again. And then it'll give me information about this the specific sales order. Purchase orders, as an example, it gives you, I showed one where we were looking at invoices, and you can go and reprint that invoice from the side panel. So it's just that ease of use in not having to jump around from Acumatica, and you can do calculations in there. So it's like having a GI and a screen that you can then tailor, and based on certain things, you could display certain things. You can have parameters and so on and so forth. So, yeah, very neat feature. And definitely that's something I would recommend that, as a client, when you move to 2026 R1 or even prior, 25 R2, you start to use that more for the users. Okay. So foreign currency payments experience. So for those of you that you're paying your vendors, which none of us like to do, but you have to do it. So what they've done is one of the issues there that was, that was always around is that currency. So if you have multiple currencies in your organization, so in other words, you've got either suppliers in USD and you in rands, or you've got you in USD, your base, and your suppliers are in rands. The ability to pay that was quite a mission, because you had to use the currency of the system at that point. So what they've allowed in this version, and I just want to get to my checks and payments. So I've already done one, so that I don't need to bore you, but just to show you what exactly it does is, if you have a look at my demo here, obviously this is on hold, but you'll see that I've got two different types of currency in my document. So from what I understand, it has been something that has been quite a mission for the guys reconciling and doing the banking and so on and so forth. So good feature that they've released, and I think this came from the community, if memory serves me. So again, it's one of those items where customers have notified, partners have notified Acumatica, and they've obviously bought that benefit to ensure that when you're paying these suppliers, etc., that it's a lot more easier when it handles foreign currency. Okay, probably another big feature, and it may seem trivial. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a small part of Acumatica, but it has such a big impact on your financials is the adjustment approval process. So what they've now brought into Acumatica. So they've got something called your assignment mappings and your approvals. So, but some of these are in other words, to enable the feature, there's drill downs associated with it. So I'm just going to give an example here just to show you what I mean by that. So this entity type allows what types of approvals you can do on your transactions. And what's always been missing, and they've added quite a few, I'm not going to go through all of these, but you'll notice there's a lot more in 2026 R1. So they've now added the adjustments. So as an example, if I'm doing an adjustment similar to a purchase order, I can now do approval settings. Maybe it's based on value, and then it can go through the normal approval process before that adjustment goes through. Okay, so I had an example just to show. Okay, so here's a simple one. I just said where the total amount of the adjustment is greater than 20,000, then go and then Maxwell Baker needs to go and approve it. Okay, so nice new feature, all about risk and exposure, and like I said, they've released a lot more of those type of approval processes. Okay, assigning default sources for non-stock codes. So, on some of your sales orders, so if you had to add a sales order and you're using non-stock codes, what they've allowed there is to have now a default source. So if it's purchasing or if it's drop ship, it'll then automatically do that and raise that. So it knows when you're doing if there's no stock, which it obviously wouldn't be, it's going to then raise that specific process. So the drop ship So if we had to take a look at my inventory, and we go and look at our non-stock items. Okay, let's see if we... Okay, then you'll notice that where your actual sources is. So my screen's a bit small here. You'll see at the bottom here, I now have the ability to source where that, so if it's on a production order, if it's on a sales order, how do I handle that requirement for the purchase or for the, the production? Okay, it's a nice feature. A lot of our clients use non-stock, and the main reason why, well, not the only reason, but one of the big reasons why, is I have the ability to allocate a GL code to a stock non-stock code. So when instead of having people just decide where, if they're doing a non-stock item, where that GL code must be associated to, or what you can do is you can say, well, for this specific stock code, it must go to the sales account X, Y, and Z, or my cost of sales to X, Y, and Z. And that's why obviously a lot of people prefer to use non-stock codes over just allowing manual assignment of purchases, and then just add in a GL code on the fly. What this then obviously, like I mentioned, allows you to do is it adds that additional step to say, well, this should be purchased, or this is for a drop ship order, or this is for, when it's a production order, it needs to be purchased as part of that production order. Okay, so if we come back to our slide, visible in transit inventory. Okay, so just to explain this one. So although Acumatica does show you, and I must be honest, I battle a bit with trying to find out where stock is when it's in transit. Acumatica does handle it differently, but if you know where to go, it's obviously quite easy to find. But where there was a bit of a void is on my my demand planning and my MRP side. So when I'm running my MRP or my demand planning, whether it's DRP or MRP, I needed visibility so that I don't over order when something is part of goods in transit. Okay, so I need to be able to see that. So I've got an example of a code now, which I'll show, and I've already run my MRP. So if I have a look at my specific item here, okay, and we're going to do inventory ID. Okay, now what you'll notice is this piece here, this transit receipt. I've done so it's a two-step transfer. I've done the two steps, so the initial part, the first step. I've done the first step, so I have raised it through a sales order, done the transfer, done pick, pack, ship, release to IN. So as far as this inventory is concerned, it's on its way to, I think I did the retail warehouse. What I then did is I didn't book in the stock. So I put in as though I was going to receipt that stock, but then I got held up for whatever reason. Maybe it was QC, maybe it was X, Y, and Z. So I left it in that status. So this transfer receipt is in a status of not released yet. So in other words, that stock, it is available because it's going to be available once it's in that warehouse. Okay, the fact that I haven't released the IN means that it's not physically shown there, but I need to know, the planning needs to know that stock will be available as soon as I've released it. So that's what this is showing me. It's showing me as a transfer supplied item, and I have a transfer receipt that once it goes through, I will have 3 available to supply for that demand. Okay, so another very nice feature, again, all around planning. And if you think about like AI, if I'm starting to do my forecasting and my planning, it needs these types of inputs so that it can understand from that type of thing. But also from the human element, it's a good feature to have so that I don't over order or under order. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Let's just go one back. So, improved planning for traceable inventory kit components. So what this is it's just add in the actual traceable item. So in other words, if you've got lot tracking or a serial item and it's part of the inventory kit component, it'll give you that visibility in the planning. I'm not going to go through this one. But that is obviously what they've released in this version. And then reliable costing for over-issued inventory. So when you over-issuing, and it could be part of my waste, what they've allowed you to do now is a feature where it'll automatically go to your GL code and record it as that. And I know there's been a few clients where we've had to do modifications around this specific item. So if you're in the manufacturing and you move into 2026 R1, it's a good feature to go and have as part of your production process. Okay, then sorry, we've got a duplicate there. So just to explain, for those of you that don't know, from a reporting perspective, Velexo, and I'll explain now why I'm referring to Velexo. So Velexo is an add-on. It's an ISV founded quite a while ago, and a very good tool. It allows you to do reporting into Excel. Now, you could do that using standard OData. However, what Velexo did is they made it a lot more efficient in terms of performance, as well as segregation of data and the ease of use to refresh those Excel spreadsheets. So a lot of people would use this in their Manex or their apps to give, whether it's auditors or your management team, your executive team. So that's been around for quite a while, and recently it chipped and changed a bit. So they were, and just to explain that, they were an ISV. For whatever reason, they went off being an ISV of Acumatica. So in other words, they're not on Acumatica's price list and license. You'd have to purchase Velexo through them or through a partner. Recently, then we got a new notification that they are now back on the ISV program, which for me is very good news. And it's a very good tool. In parallel to that, what Acumatica has done is release something similar. Now, there is going to be, and I think I mentioned this in the previous session, there is going to be an announcement around what is going to be difference between the two, why Acumatica has released their version. Is it a direct compete, so to speak, with Velexo? And what we've heard is that it's not going to be a direct compete. Velexo will have its area where it plays very well in, and Insight Excel, which is call it Acumatica's version, is going to be quite limited in what it can do. Okay, so at this stage, Insight Excel can only do ARM reports. It cannot do generic inquiry. So Velexo can pull down information from a generic inquiry, whereas your Excel Insights can only do it from an ARM report. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to demo this, but I can't do it because we've got this on our live system, and it uses Microsoft to obviously link in Excel, so it uses SSO. So in other words, your Azure, you've got to set it up through Azure, so that when I log into Excel, I'm actually logging into Acumatica, same as what Velexo does. Okay, so we've got it on a live system. I tried to put it on the demo, but it's getting conflict. So I'm not going to be able to show you exactly I would have liked to show you, dropping down a TB or an income statement and then refreshing that. But some of this is live data. So what I'm going to do is just run through how it looks and what it does. So like with Velexo, is I have a login. So here it's an add-on application into Excel. Once I log in, I'm connected to my site. So again, this is going to segregate data. So if I don't have access to see GL information, as an example, and balances, I wouldn't be able to see that information. Okay. So first of all, segregation of data. Secondly is it logs into the system, then it can do certain things. So for those of you that have seen Velexo, these look pretty similar. I've got my connection, so I could have multiple instances. Same thing here, I can refresh my current sheet or multiple sheets if I had multiple sheets. And then I've got certain things. So certain things, what I've noticed compared to Velexo, it's a little bit simpler because, you know, they obviously have programmed this in a different way, and it gives you the ability to do that. So as an example, if I wanted to do company now, I could drop company, and there would be all of the companies. Okay, so some features that are different and more user friendly, and other features in Velexo, you know, that won't be available in this at all, from what we understand. Okay, so let's say, and I'm just going to use this as an example. So here I've got my TB, but if you imagine a financial income statement, you know, I'd have my sales and my cost of sales, and I would have my values in here based on which GL am I looking at. So it could be budget or it could be actual, and you can do both. So I could have my actual and my budget sitting next to each other. So in this case, I would have actual. Here I could have my budget, and I could do a comparison for my year-on-year, month-to-month, or period-to-period. So what it's got is this formula. So very similar to Velexo is I would have my end balance, and then it's going to explain, well, what is all of the fields. Okay, so we could have an item that says inventory as an example, or it could be sales, and then you could either use the code or you could use your class. And then which book are we using? Book code is my actual. Okay, so here I'm just going to refresh this. So let's say I wanted to look at period 3. Okay, then you'll notice it's going into Acumatica. You'll see the data's out of sync, so it's refreshing the current sheet, and it's going to go and populate those values. So this is not available yet anywhere. You cannot get access to this as a customer. It's in beta testing at the moment, but I don't think they're allowing customers to use this yet. There's still quite a bit. I've been playing with it a little bit, and I think there's still a few things they need to iron out. But as soon as that is done, you know, then I think you will start to find that this may be a license module. They may bring it in as part of Acumatica. So Velexo will still have its place because it also has the write back feature. This won't have a write back feature. And then you'll be able to, you know, to use both, or just use this one if it meets your requirements, just purely in terms of your ARM reporting. Not too sure why it's taken so long. It was much quicker earlier. Okay, and there it comes through. So and then again, if I wanted to refresh, I could, you know, just do the current sheet, and it'll go and refresh that data again. Okay, so that is my, and you'll see here it's telling you, you know, how long it's taken and so on and so forth. There's definitely something different because it was definitely a lot quicker. But again, pros and cons, you know, I think it's good because it's obviously designed by Acumatica. However, it is light when you could compare it to Velexo. So I'm still seeing the need for both, especially if you want to do that advanced reporting in Excel, and you want to use the write back feature. So we've got a lot of clients that use the write back features, also generic inquiry reporting. And again, even though you can do both of these using OData to a degree, this understands financials, so my opening balance, my end balance. So does Velexo. OData wouldn't understand that. Also with OData, and OData, if you pull multiple sheets at the bottom here, so let's say I had OData and I'd had 5 sheets that were built in my Manix. It runs in sequential. So it's going to do the first call and then update that spreadsheet. It's going to do the second call, third call, etc. Whereas both this one and Velexo run in parallel. So they update the data, they simultaneously updating all the data sets at the same time. So to give an example, at one of our clients with Velexo, we took their Manic reports, they were running them in OData, and we basically just took those same reports and moved it into the Velexo software and the format. And we took it down to, I think it's running at 3 or 4 minutes now. So huge differences. So I'd highly recommend, if you haven't heard of Velexo and you're not using it as a client, I would definitely recommend using that, especially for Manix and that little, budgeting is also a good one, or where I want to do active and I've got a whole lot of information I have which sits outside of Acumatica sometimes, which would be quite complex to bring into Acumatica. So you rather want to keep that in Excel and you refer into sheets, but you're at least able to refresh those sheets, and it's limited to the user that's logged into the Excel sheet. Okay. Okay, so just to recap, quite a lot of features, that I've run through. What we did previously, and what I'm thinking of doing for possibly the next session. So Melissa, who has contacted some of you previously before about these sessions, we'll get some of your ideas again. I think what would be nice is to maybe do almost like a tips and tricks, because we often see that we tend to focus on what's the latest and the greatest, but there's a whole lot of things in Acumatica which has always been around, but people potentially don't know about. So as an example, the SSO. So some of those types of things we want to revisit and explain it to you guys, show you, and make it more of a generic session. And then we are in the process. They have started to release information around 2026 R2. So obviously, once we've tested that and got the early adopter version, which they'll be releasing very shortly, if not already, we will then go onto it and start to test those so that we can keep you informed. So that by the time you're ready for that version, then you already know what's coming and what you need to look out for, so you can plan it accordingly. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I don't have a poll today, so I think what's been working well is Melissa contacting the clients or the attendees, seeing if there's anything that we can assist with, or if you liked a certain feature but you just want to find out certain more information about it, then please discuss that with Melissa. And we'll arrange, one-on-one sessions with yourselves to run through some of these features. And if you're not sure whether you're on a legacy license or on the new one, by all means, reach out to us. But as I mentioned, we are going through our base, and we're trying to onboard clients, so that by the time that they need to go on, you already know what's involved. Or if you want to use the AI, you're in a position where you can do that. And transition quite easily. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I think I'm giving everybody back 3 minutes. So yeah, really appreciate the time, and for those of you that joined, if you did, like I said, if you need to find out anything more about 2026 R1, or when are you upgrading to it, or how can you upgrade to it, Melissa will be your contact, and she will be discussing it with you, and then we can arrange that so that you can start to use some of these features that I've shown you. Thanks very much, and have a good day further.